Welcome to this week's edition of the Deck Talk Podcast. We have one heck of a show lined up for you for tonight, but you know, as always, first things first, we have to talk about the sponsor for tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Bruiser Baits. Baits made by fishermen for fishermen, family owned and operated with one goal in mind: to continuously strive to produce the best premium quality baits that are proven to put fish in your boat day in and day out, helping the beginner angler catch more fish and the seasoned tournament angler put more cash in the pocket. From soft plastics to jerk baits, crankbaits, flat-out tungsten weights, apparel, and a whole lot more. Fish the best baits made right here in the USA. Check out their full selection of baits, tackle, apparel, and accessories at www.bruiserbaits.com. And when you do, make sure to use our promo code DeckTalk10. Once again, that is bruiserbaits.com. Don't forget, use our promo code at checkout, DeckTalk10. Man, I tell you what, that is a fact. Gotta check out Bruiser Baits. But anyway, our guest tonight, let's roll right into who our guest is tonight. Joining the show tonight, well, quite frankly, he is a Bruiser Bait teammate of myself and Collins and the podcast. He is an MPFL pro going into, I believe, his third season on the MPFL. But anyway, we get into talking about his upcoming season and last season on MPFL, different changes that's going to take place, including his expectations for his season this year. And hey, we can't have a Bruiser Bait teammate of ours on without talking a little bit about Bruiser Baits itself. So anyway, let's roll right into the show, guys. Without further ado, enjoy tonight's episode of the Deck Talk Podcast with our guest, Robert Wroblewski. See ya on the flip side, tight lines, and hope everybody enjoys the show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Deck Talk Podcast. In this episode, we have a Bruiser Baits flat-out tungsten teammate of ours on, and it's going to be one heck of a show. And we're going to have a blast, go down some rabbit holes, talk about some Bruiser Baits. But if you don't know, guys, I'm Colin Burnett.
That's right, Colin, and I'm Norma Lee, and we are super excited about tonight's show, man. And you're right, we are going to go down some rabbit holes with this cool cat. But anyway, we have on tonight's show, and again, like Colin said, he is one of our Bruiser Bait teammates, Robert Wroblewski, and I hope I got that last name right. Robert, we just were talking about that, but I think I butcher it up every time I say it. But Robert, man, what is going on? And we are happy to have you come on board tonight with us.
No, What's it's up, an honor. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Norman, I've been bugging you for the past couple of years to have me get on this podcast. And you've been like, no, not this time, but next time. So I'm finally here. So
yes, sir. We're excited about having you on, man. Finally was able to get all of our schedules linked up. And but you know, me and Colin has been blessed, dude. It has been so crazy. We're actually right now, our live episodes is booked all the way up through the beginning of April.
That's awesome.
And it's just crazy. It's a good crazy, though, but we are super blessed. But we are super happy to have you come on board tonight with us, Robert. And look forward to talking to you about what you got going on.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, do we want to go down the Bruiser rabbit hole right this second, or do we want to talk about some MPFL? Let's talk about some MPFL then, because we know that we can definitely go down some Bruiser rabbit holes, because they've got some phenomenal baits that's coming out.
Yeah.
I'm stoked about getting them and ready to use. But Robert, man, how long have you been fishing the NPFL?
Well, I'm actually going into my third season.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but how did you get into fishing? Because most of everybody, they kind of grew up with it and stuff, and started out maybe doing some little bluegill, crappie fishing or whatever. Just is that kind of how you fell into it as well? And
as a kid.
And how did you get into bass fishing?
Well, I was born and raised in Miami, Miami, Florida. So I had access to a lot of like those little canals and stuff. And
Oh man.
my father and my grandmother would be the ones that used to take me down the road and stuff because I was really young and they didn't want to be by myself. And so yeah, we used to catch bluegill, little bass, peacocks and stuff. And I got growing up
Jealous.
peacocks and all
Wow.
those sorts of different species that over there in Miami, the cichlids and all kinds of cool looking fish, the snakeheads and whatnot. And then I ended up moving to Naples, Florida when I was, I don't know, 13, 14 years old. And then as I gotten older in high school, I joined this fishing club and I was able to get to know a couple, local hammers down in that area called Tommy Burgess and Terry Metzger. I don't know if you're familiar with those names. Norman, you probably are,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
in Florida. And there were true hammers back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And so I grew up with them, being around them and stuff. And then I joined a club called the Florida Cracker Bass Club, which is my very first club that I ever joined. First term I'd ever fished was actually at Lake Placid. I know you're familiar with that, and
Been there a few times.
been there, and that was a sight to see. That's for sure. It was first time being on a bass boat, and I remember getting on a plane and going really fast, and I was like, dude, I'm holding on for my dear life because I didn't know what to expect. So yeah, from there I just got hooked on, and I've always used to watch videos, and every Saturday morning they used to have like the in fisherman shows when I was a kid, and then a Bassmaster will put it up on sometimes, and I would watch that constantly, and I just knew like when I was a kid that's kind of like what I always wanted to do. And then as I gotten older and I decided to get a boat and everything when I was really young, 21 at the time, and I just felt like I was like a little bit different than all the other anglers. I had just this drive that like not a lot of people had, and I just kept going with it and stuff. And I took a little bit break, because I got in the college scene and hanging out with the party people and hanging out with girls more often than none, and then things got a little carried away. But then I knew I've always wanted to get back to it, so I ended up getting my captain's license when I was in my early 30s. And so I started guiding out of Lake Okeechobee, and that would be my freshwater lake that I used to guide to. And then I used to do saltwater fishing as well in the Florida Everglades. I used to target like redfish, trout, snook, permit, tarpon, jewfish, all those crazy species down there. And I usually did it during seasonal time. So I'd go back and forth Okeechobee and then saltwater. And then I met my wife, Pam, and then I started forgetting about the Everglades National Park, and I started going to Estero Bay and started, saltwater fishing there. And I just always told her, I was like, I really want to take this bass fishing seriously. So we ended up getting a big old boat. It was one of my first true big bass boats that I ended up getting. And I started really just grinding and learning how to fish Okeechobee a lot. And then over the years, I never really won anything like anything big, but I always was like there in the money, and I was always close to try to winning. And I knew there was a couple things that I could have like fixed to try to get a win, but it's really hard. It's got to be like your time, in order to get that win. And I felt like in 1 year, I think it was in 2022. I hit a plateau, and I felt like if I'm ever going to make something of me, I need to get out of Florida and get away from my comfort zone, because in reality, you're fishing like 1 to 3 foot of water and grass. You don't have any grass or anything. And with technology and electronics changing the world and bass fishing as it is, I knew that I need to learn all that stuff. And I wasn't able to learn any of that in Florida. So we decided to sell our Florida place and moved up to LJ, Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains. And it was quite an experience for the last 3-4 years, learning how to use forward-facing sonar, and just grasping it and fine-tuning all my technology and the electronics. And then now, fishing the NPFL, going to my 3rd season, and we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. getting away from LJ, being in my comfort zone from there, finally getting comfortable, and then coming to Tennessee and getting to learn all these lakes up here. It's totally different. Fishing these lakes and fishing down in Georgia, because you got herring lakes in Georgia, and then up here you got the Tennessee River, and then you got ledge fishing, and it's just a little bit different, which is a good challenge for me. I feel like as an angler, getting out of your comfort zone and learning a new body of water is like, it's going to make you a better angler at the long run.
Right.
And so I'm pretty benefited, and it's been really helpful for me being up here, and my wife is really supportive with me fishing and stuff, and I'm learning. So
yeah. Well, what's been the biggest thing that you've learned, because like you've talked about being from Florida, fishing the canals and stuff like that, and I mean, I would love to be able to just walk out my back door and have a canal in the back to where I can go smash some peacocks. And I mean, because to me, in which Norman and I, we've talked about fishing peacocks on the podcast and stuff. But I mean, to me, there's nothing like freshwater fish. There's probably pound for pound not a better fighting fish than a peacock bass. And but how'd you go from the canal, or what's the biggest thing you learned from going from a canal to fishing Okeechobee? I mean, you went to Placid, and so Placid is a little bit of a deeper water lake, to going up to like a Highland Reservoir and LJ and fishing for the blue heron, and then coming to the Tennessee and fishing the Tennessee River, which people, if you don't know, like Tennessee River, if you have current, the bite's going to be on. But if there is no current, you might as well. I mean, you're going to be chunking and winding, just getting some practice in on casting is what I tell people.
Yeah, and that's pretty much for any river system as well. Any river system that usually generates current. If that current's not flowing, that makes for a tough bite. And when you're a tournament angler, you gotta figure out how to catch them when the current's not flowing, and it's pretty difficult for the guys that go out there and they don't quite have the experience that a lot of other guys have on really how to catch them. The bite really goes down, but that current makes a big deal on any river system.
Yeah.
So.
But what's been the biggest thing that you've learned from being able to experience shallow water fishing down in Florida, to a Highland Reservoir, to fishing the Tennessee River?
I know one thing too, like I've always been a power fisherman, as a grinder all the time, chucking and winding. So when I moved up to Georgia, that's kind of like what I did right away. And I realized it was like a learning curve. Like it's not like that up here. I mean, certain times of the year that you can kind of do that and get away with it. But a lot of times it's more open water, a little bit deeper, brush piles and that kind of thing. And of course, fishing blue heron lakes, just learning how to fish spots and what their behaviors are like. And it's just a totally different type of species out there. I mean, it was a learning curve in the beginning. It took me about a year to kind of adapt to it. I look at it this way. Like if you're going to a new area for the first time and you've never really experienced it, I think it takes a full year to kind of grasp it. Like you have to have seasons. Oh, yeah. You have to have the fall, winter, spring, summer. You got to play with those seasons. And then the following year, now I know what to use during this time of the year. And then you adapt to it a little bit quicker. So that took about a year to kind of get acclimated. And I was fortunate to have a few friends that fish in the MPFL. Will Harkins, he's a good buddy of mine that I met in Georgia. Absolute hammer. I don't know if you know anything about him, but he's just a complete stud in fishing. He kind of showed me a little bit of tricks and on the books and stuff like that not a lot of people knew about. And obviously nothing is ever a secret. Everything gets thrown out there. Nothing keeps a secret anymore. So everybody's got like social media and stuff. They'll post their favorite baits and techniques and stuff like that. So, a lot of things got exposed, but for the most part, him teaching me a few things here and there kind of like made me realize, okay, I know what to look for and that kind of thing and stuff. And then coming up to here in Tennessee, so my first true current lake that I got to fish in the Tennessee River was Pickwick, was this past year. And I've never been to Pickwick before. I did pre-practice before that event started, but I actually ended up placing 12th in that event, which was my best finish so far. And I knew nothing about current or anything. The research that I've done and gained from like YouTube and all that social media platforms, kind of like made me set up where I wanted to fish and how I wanted to fish. So I kind of found this little honey hole that I was there for 3 days, and I burned only like a quarter tank of gas in 3 days of practice, which is great.
That's nice.
You just get one spot and just rotate a couple brush piles and stuff. But yeah, I mean, if I didn't have forward facing sonar, I probably would have never gotten 12th place on that tournament.
Right.
I would have just fished blind. So with the technology, especially with forward-facing sonar, I've just grasped it really well, and I feel like I can compete with the best with it. And I had my best year this past season in the NPFL, even though I choked the last 2 tournaments. And quite frankly, I can't comprehend why I choked that bad. But I learned from it, and got to move on. I mean, you can't sit there and dwell on those past because it's just going to haunt you to your sleep. So. This is a new season. It's a fresh. Obviously, NPFL decided to ban forward-facing sonar for this year, and I was pretty vocal about it. I was one of the people that stood up and voiced my opinion about it, and was hoping that it would get across the stage. But they kind of already made their decision, and I totally respect the NPFL and every decision that they make, because they do what they have to do for their business. And I totally understand that. It just sucked because for the last 4 years, that's all I learned. Because in order to compete and cash checks or win, you have to learn forward-facing sonar.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're going to be fishing and you're going to be placing at the bottom of the field every event.
Yeah. Driving home with no paycheck. And so,
have you been up to the? Have you had any tournaments yet up on the northern lakes, like the St. Lawrence or up in that?
No, we actually this year one of our events is at the St. Lawrence River, which I'm actually looking forward to that event. And this year, but I remember my first year, I went to Saginaw for the first time.
Right.
And then, but I never really targeted smallmouth because that place fishes a lot like Okeechobee. I don't know if you ever heard of Saginaw Bay, but it's like it's like a giant Okeechobee. That's my opinion. Like the whole bay is like a fishbowl, kind of like the lake. Yeah. And on the edges, you got the marshes and stuff like that. You got cattails, pencil reeds, lily pads. They had I call it like shrimp grass, milfoil, whatever. So it was more of my comfort zone. I was able to power fish and get a good check that time. And then the next event was in Lake Erie in Sandusky, and wow, that was a rude awakening for me. I beat my boat to death on that event. That was kind of one of my worst events. I actually found fish at the Detroit River. So that was my first day one. I decided to run from Sandusky to the Detroit River, which was like 120 miles. And it took me 2.5 hours to get there. And as soon as I got there, I had to get gas right away. And then I was able to fish, and I had like 3 hours to fish, got my limit, and then started driving back. But I hope to never go back there again, because unless I had forward-facing sonar, I would like to go back, but it put a bad taste in my mouth. So I was fortunate to fish Lake Erie. I was fortunate to fish Lake Huron. I think after my Saginaw was over, I was able to go up to Lake Michigan and Traverse City, and I was able to fish those lakes up, and then Lake Michigan up in that area. And man, the water is pristine, beautiful, clean. I can see smallmouth, and I can be able to snipe them and throw a Ned rig or a little swim bait or a drop shot in front of them, and they would just pound it. And I'm like, dude, this is fun. I wish Saginaw was like this, but no, I started to chase largemouth that event. But No, this year we get to go to the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario. So it's another great lake I get to fish. I got to mark 4 out of the 5 Great Lakes that I got to fish. So I'm looking forward to that event a lot.
Now,
Yeah.
how was your learning curve? Like going to places like the St. Lawrence and some of the lakes you just talked about, where they have a pristine. I mean, fishing for smallmouth on the St. Lawrence, for example, is a heck of a lot different than catching smallmouth like on Pickwick, or you fall or one of them Tennessee River type fisheries. What was your learning curve like when you're going to those big bodies of water? Because quite frankly, when you go up there, if you're not targeting 4.5 pound smallmouth, certain times of the year, you're fishing not to make the cut. So, what's your learning curve? I mean, somebody from Florida to go up to like the St. Lawrence, what's the learning curve on trying to figure out that smallmouth bite on them bodies of water?
So I haven't been to St. Lawrence River yet, but I can go ahead and tell you a little story about Saginaw. So after Pickwick was over, I was able to go pre-practice Saginaw before the cutoff.
Right.
And for that whole week, that's all I did was target smallmouth. And I mean, I had an absolute ball. I figured it out. I figured out how to catch them and what to do and what to use. So leading up to that event, we had 3 days of practice. And for those 3 days of practice, all I did was practice for smallmouth.
Right.
So we had a day off. And then day one of the event, and the wind completely shifted, and everything was started blowing in that area. Okay, I need to make a decision. Should I go run out here and beat my boat and my body to death to catch a bunch of brownfish, or should I just go shallow and do my thing and grind and catch a bunch of largemouth and just hope to get a check? And that's what I did. I kind of chickened out, and I to this day I'm kind of disappointed in myself because I went there and spent all that time pre-practicing, learning how to catch smallmouth. I had a blast. And then I did that all 3 days of practice. And then to go around and not do any of that, but I made a good decision. I mean, I got 22nd place. I made a good check. I mean, I can't complain.
Yeah.
I was a little frustrated when I was on stage because I'm telling myself, man, I spent all this time smallmouth fishing. I didn't even get to do it during tournament time. So,
So what, because I grew up in Tennessee, I grew up in Nashville, and then moved to Chattanooga. And going to Florida, like everything in Florida looks like there's going to be a 10-pounder. And so when you're in Florida, how do you go about knowing like what is like the best area to fish? I mean, because you can go a quarter of a mile down the bank that looks exactly the same, but then at the end of that quarter of a mile, you can go and catch 5 or 6 of them that are 5-6 pounds or whatever, but you just fish the same bank that looks exactly the same.
I look at it this way: it's trial and error. Especially when you fish in Florida, it's like a lake like Itzapaga or Okeechobee or like the Kissimmee chain. I know nowadays, like a lot of people live scope in Kissimmee and Toho. And then same thing with Harris. A lot of people do scope over there. So those lakes are a little bit deeper than Okeechobee itself. But like when I was fishing those lakes, it was just all trial and error. I mean, it was just grind, and then you find little sections in the lake, and they usually hold fish. And a lot of times, Norman, you're pretty well known about this. It's Lake Okeechobee is like a flip of the switch. Yeah. All of a sudden, you'd be going down a bank and like, okay, I've caught fish here. Oh, all of a sudden, I catch 10 bass at 25 pounds, and all of a sudden, 30 minutes later, it's done. So, right. I mean, to me, Okeechobee is about trial and error. It's about putting time on that lake and constantly grinding because that lake itself changes like every 2 hours. It's just like it has a mind of its own, and I was able to kind of just learn. What's good about Okeechobee and being in there my pretty much my whole life. I've seen how the lake flows up and down. The elevation usually, like I seen it like when it was like 9 feet, so I was able to see what's out there on the edges. And then I fished it when it was 12 feet, 15 feet. So you kind of get familiar of what areas are hard bottom and what areas had grass that has the hard bottom, and then you can kind of like break it down that way. But that lake has changed so much with them spraying and all the hurricanes and the elevation of the water. It just every day it's like a constant battle,
Yeah.
just trying to learn it, and everything is changing at an ample time.
Right. Well, then also like the mats, like they'll move as well. I mean, so like been there before to where like you've got this little channel and stuff, and then like I know I have this little point. Well, then the next time that we had went out, I was like, all right, let's go hit this little point that's off of this, and it's a little grass point. Let's go flip it. We caught fish there. Next thing we know, I mean, it is just wide open space. So we're like, and Norman's like, yeah, man, this grass mats, they move constantly, and it's like, and I'm like, this is crazy because I'm thinking like Tennessee and stuff like that. We know like for instance, like on Chickamauga, I know where grass is going to be because year in, year out, grass is going to be there. I know what grass is going to come up first. I know where the grass is going to be last. And as long as the TVA just stays away from it and not allow or contract out to have them spray it, which you was just talking about like on Okeechobee, I mean, you can have one heck of a fall to early winter with having a frog bite. And it don't matter if the water temp gets down into the 50s. And even I've caught matted fish or caught with frogs on mats in 48 degrees just because that grass had stayed there matted up. And but now, I mean, they'll go out. They've contracted out here this past year to have a company come and spray, and it just, I mean, it ruins everything. I mean, but we know, I kind of go back to what we know the areas to where we can go. But like on Okeechobee and stuff, you're kind of having to go out and trial by error and see where the grass is going to be at because it is constantly shifting.
Yeah. I tell you, my last year of competing on it, when I was on Okeechobee, I found an area. The only way to get to this area was going through a boat trail. You had to go through a really only wide enough for one boat to go one way. And I found this area in practice, and I marked the entrance to this boat trail. It was the only way in there to get back, and it opened up into a lake as you went down that boat trail. Well, I marked the entrance to that boat trail so I could find it easily day one of the tournament. And I was riding down the shoreline, and my waypoint came up, and the shoreline just kept going. It was hard bank the whole way down that I was following. I was like, where in the heck did this entrance go? Well, what had happened was huge mats overnight. I guess I had wind coming in from the lakeside, blew 3 huge mats that completely covered up the entrance in to get back to where I wanted to go. So basically, 2 days of practice was for naught because I couldn't get back in there. You couldn't go on each side of it because it was all hard line. And these mats blew in, and it looked like a continuation of the shoreline. So that goes back a little bit to the point Colin was talking about. You know, Okeechobee could change pretty much overnight. In a lot of the cases, when you practice in that lake, I wasn't really looking for bites. I'm looking for areas that look like, you know, water clarity, watercolor, sandy bottom. Looking for areas because it changes so frequently, like you were saying, Robert. You could find them one day, the next day it's totally different. So if you keep the trolling motor down or just keep covering water and look for areas that you could see that's going to hold fish. That's pretty much anyway. That's what I used to do when I used to practice that lake. Not necessarily looking for bites, but looking for areas. But yeah, that was crazy too, because the only way in was that one cut going through there, and I was damned if I could find it. And it looked like the shoreline continued all the way through there, and like, holy cow!
Was that Moonshine Bay?
Huh?
Was that Moonshine Bay?
It was close. It was actually on the north side down by Belle Glade.
Okay. So
I don't even remember the exact area right now. It was down towards the Belle Glade area, where Belle Glade comes around, the shoreline comes around as it's going up back towards like where
Slim's?
yeah, by Slim's Fish Camp down there. But the water was up right then, and you could actually get way back in, but it was a hard shoreline. There was one cut that led, and I found it in practice, that led back to a back, and it opened up into a big pocket in the back. But the only way to get to it was that cut. And man, let me tell you, when I found a motherload in practice, I thought I had this darn tournament won. And I had the entrance to that cut marked. And I got to the mark, and I'm like, where the heck is the entrance at? And it completely had like either one huge floating mat or two or three of them, but it completely blew in there. And from the lakeside, it looked like the shoreline, the hard shoreline, just continued all the way through. I'm like, crap, never was able to get in there. But I could just imagine what if I was able to get in there. I'm like, oh man, I was catching 3 and 4 pounders almost every cast back in there when I found them. It's like, dang man, yeah. But it changes quick.
I'll tell you what, that lake, if it's high right now, but if you ever get a chance, and if it gets down to 12 feet to 11 feet, my God, it is unbelievable. You just get a 3/4 ounce jig, black and blue, and just flip the outside edge and just hold on. I mean, it's a lot of fun when it gets to that low.
Matter of time then, isn't it?
No, I know. So it's been a couple years since I've been there. I didn't get to go last year, but I went like 2 years ago, and I fished. I fished with a buddy of mine named Eddie Miller, and we fished a Rollins. I think it was like the first Rollins of the year, or the second Rollins of the year. And it was in May. And I think you remember when all those 30-pound bags were caught. I think it was 30-pound bags caught. Yeah. Something ridiculous. I mean, we came in with like 27 pounds and we didn't even get a check. So.
Yeah. I remember Scott, I think Scott Martin was fishing that one. He said he came back to the weigh-in with like 29.5 pounds, thinking he was going to be right up there in the top 3 or 4. And I think he was like 17th or 20th with 29.5 pounds.
I know we were in like 30th place with 20. We had 26 and something. I'm like, I thought we were going to get a good check. Nope. You have to have 30.
Yeah. Well, but what was crazy at that time, because I can remember when that happened, and it went like Okeechobee, like for about 3 weeks to 4 that it just blew up, that you was just seeing massive bags come out of there. And I remember saying something that Scott Martin said, that he was surprised that if you see it during it maybe one day that happens, but it was lasting, and it lasted 3 to 4 weeks, and he's like, this will never happen again.
Yeah, but the funny thing about that too is that everybody sees all these 30-pound bags coming in that one tournament and thinks the whole lake's on fire. Well, from what Scott was telling us, that all those 30-pound bags was a concentration of like one area. He was saying all the boats with the huge bags could basically see each other. It wasn't like that whole lake was producing in big bags. It was one area in that whole lake that had all of them 30-pound bags. So, but yeah, it's crazy.
Back on the NPFL deal, what lakes are y'all fishing this year?
First one we go to in the beginning of March is Sandy Cooper. And then our second one is in Lake Norman. It's going to be in April in North Carolina. The third one is at Lake Douglas. It's right next to the house, 45 minutes. So I'm really looking forward to that one because I can sleep in my own bed on that event and save some money on staying in places and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The fourth one is Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma. And then we go straight up to north and fish the St. Lawrence River in July. And then our last event is in September in Logan Martin, which I'm kind of glad the season's done in September, because this past year our season took forever. I mean, we started the beginning or the end of February, and our last tournament was in December because we had that cancellation in St. John.
Right.
And so then our fifth event got moved to Lake of the Ozarks, which was in October, which was supposed to be our last event of the year. And then we ended up rescheduling and going to Lake Murray in December. Yeah. So it was a long year. It really was. It was a true testament. Kudos to Kyle Walter, who won Angler of the Year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a true testament of how you can fish from the winter mode all the way through till the beginning of winter. So kudos to him for claiming that. I mean, kid's a stud. So
Well, and the thing is which I've known Kyle for I don't know 7-8 years, and I guess he used to live not too far from me when I lived in Cleveland, and I would see him out on the boat or at the ramp all the time, and then it got to where he'd see me out on my boat, and he'd just come flying right by me and just waving, but I have never seen an angler, especially for as young as what he is, to his cast precision has been phenomenal. I mean, you can put a cup wherever and he's going to get it. I mean, he can pitch it right in there, skip it into it. And, but I tell him all the time, but it's his style of fishing though. I mean, he's always, if that trolling motor is not on 10, then he has the trolling motor, not deployed. He's not using it. He's going to another spot. He's always constantly, and I'm like, God, you need to slow down. And he never does. But it's amazing how he just finds stuff, and his mind of thinking. I've talked to him because I don't know if you know that he used to be a professional poker player.
Yep.
And so his mind is all about numbers. And talking to him and how he figures things out is not like a typical how a fisherman I would think a fisherman would usually think. And it's all about numbers, a percentage of how many casts he's got to throw a day and whatever lake that he has. He knows that I've got to throw 800 casts to be able to get on this one, or I just need to make 400 casts on this lake. It all depends, really. It's all a numbers game to him, and that's all he really cares about. And I'm like, golly, come on. Just go out there and just fish. But,
so after the Lake Murray tournament, when he won Angler of the Year, I talked to him. I wanted to ask him a couple questions. I told him, like, listen, you are arguably one of the best fishermen out there, but what does it take to be in that level? And he just says, to be honest, Rob, you got to fish and fish and fish. And it's all about experience. You know, he's been in the game for a while. You know, he's young, but he's also, I mean, he's been fishing the elites. They fish 9 events a year, and he fishes probably other things. And then he's fished the MPFL. So with 9 plus 6, that's 15 tournaments. And
that's not counting locals that he's getting in either.
Yeah, exactly. And it's constant fishing events, getting that repertoire. With me, it's like I've only fished 12 professional tournaments because I've only had 2 seasons of the belt, and I've done a couple of things in between that. But I don't fish enough events, so I don't have I have fished a lot of events just in Florida, but being up here, I've never fished like any other big events besides just the MPFL. And I think once I get into my 3rd season, things are going to be they're going to set a little bit better. And this year itself, you know, besides fishing just the 6 tournaments in the MPFL, I'm going to be doing some BFLs, hopefully getting some Toyota series. I just need to put more time in tournament fishing and get that repetition, because that's just going to make you a better angler. You're going to spend a lot of money and probably lose a lot of money, but at the same time, in order to succeed, you have to have the experience, because a lot of times, you know, when you don't have the experience, you're going to get your butt kicked. And I pretty much my very first year, I mean, I went there with a big head, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to cash a check every tournament. Cashed 1 tournament out of all the events. So, you know, it's like it's all about experience, putting out there, spending the time. I mean, I'm fortunate. My wife lets me go out there and fish, 3-4 days a week during the season, whether it's like, you know, I fish like a half day or whatever the case may be. It's just putting that time in the water and learning and just grinding and just figuring out what these fish are doing, their behavior and all that stuff. And it's just going to make me a better angler. But, you know, I can sit there and preach you that I might do it, but I got to make a statement this year. I mean, if I don't make a statement this year, then I'm just eating my words.
Yeah, and I really feel
Well,
too that in the MPFL, that actually is probably the biggest stacked field out of all three top level series, the elites and the Bass Pro Tour for that matter, just due to the fact that first off, you have a lot of the elite series guys fishing the MPFL as well, and the Bass Pro Tour guys. But not only that, but you're fishing against a lot larger field than the elite series as well. So
yeah.
my feeling is it's harder to really be able to cash your check or even win one of the events in the MPFL than it even is like your elite series and your Bass Pro Tour, just because of that reason. The field's so bigger, but I mean, it has a stacked field. People don't realize how stacked the NPFL field is, to be honest with you. You guys got some hammers. Not only the Elite Series guys and the Bass Pro Tour guys that fish it, but everybody all the way down from the top to the bottom is stacked hammers on that tour.
Oh, it is. When I saw the roster, we were we weren't allowed to say who was joining and stuff like that. So we have this little page that we can go on and see who signed the contract, who's in for the
Yeah.
season. And I just saw the names. I'm like, wow. I mean, if I do good this year and if I win one of these events, then like it's a true testament of how
Yeah.
how good I can be and stuff. And because of the field, I mean, you're right. Like you got guys like Gerald Swindell, Jason Christie, Justin Atkins, I think is fishing. Zach Burge, Patrick Walters is coming back. You got
Yeah.
Kyle Welcher, Drew Cook,
Yeah.
Bill Lowen, Kobe Kruger from Florida. I mean, I can keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Now is
ridiculous how many hammers are fishing, and I
Yeah.
don't blame the elites at all, because what the elites did this year and decided to do the no entry fees and then the payout is just, to me, it's garbage. If you're not in the top 10 in the elites this year, you're just not going to make any money. So a lot of those guys made a business decision saying, okay, so I got free entry fees. Let me go ahead and get my sponsorship money and go join the NPFL and see if I can cash a check.
yeah.
So like that's why a lot of those guys decided to go to the MPFL, and I think a lot had to do with that, and a lot to do with it with the no forward facing sonar. A lot of guys like Swindell just says, I just want to go fishing and forget about everything and just fish and have fun.
Yeah.
Well, and when he can just go and fish, that's when he's the most dangerous.
Yeah.
And but you was talking to Kyle, and he was just saying just the time, just having water time, being out there fishing makes a difference. And we had John Cox on, and John Cox, every tournament that's around, he's hopping in and fishing. And he told us, because I'm like, why? What is it you're fishing all these tournaments. Like, how do you go in and have your mindset? Because to me, like, I always want to go and I want to do the best I can. I want to win that first place. And he says, well, how he looks at going into these tournaments, and it was a very interesting statement, because I never thought of it this way. He says, when I go into a tournament, he says, if I win first place, great. But my mindset is, he says, if you have 100 anglers and they pay out the top 30 or whatever, he says, my main thing is I want to get a $10,000 check. That's all I want. And he says, each tournament, he says, I'm fishing 25, 30 tournaments a year. And if I get a $10,000 check, one out of 100 field, I don't have that whole the rest of the 99 people that I'm trying to beat. I'm just trying to beat only a certain percentage of them to be able to cash a check. And I'm like, and he's like, and if I do that and 15 of them, then what do I got? And I was like, it's a very interesting way that I had never even thought about looking at trying to fish. And he's like, because some lakes sets up to where, you may be able to go after that first place. But a lot of the lakes, the best opportunity for you to do is to fish for that $10,000 instead of trying to fish for that first place. And I was like, I've never thought of going out to a tournament just for that, if I won $10,000 in a tournament, I'd be like, all right, let's go to the next one. So,
Yeah.
But speaking of John Cox, is he fishing that this year?
Yep, he's back. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame him.
And he should.
He's not. There's no live scope, so of course he's going to fish it. Yeah.
Yeah, we seen him when the Classic was in Knoxville. We were able to talk to him out on the boat dock before blast off, and I was like, John, where's your forward face sonar? He says it's in the box, and then we had him
in the truck.
And it says it's in the box in the truck, and then we seen him at Tulsa. And I was like, John, where's the forward face sonar? He says it's still in the box. We had him on the podcast, and he said, that forward facing sonar is not in the truck anymore. And I said, is it on the boat? He says, no, it's in the garage now. So, and that sets up, if he can just go and just fish shallow water, beating the bank, he's fine and dandy. I mean, he's going to be a tough one to beat if he can get on some good fish.
That's a good thing about the elites is that they have the way they have their schedule set. It kind of suits them in a way. They always schedule those tournaments on like when it's really good. So he's able to to get in his comfort zone and grind fishing shallow and stuff like that. And he's arguably one of the best shallow water fishermen out there. And with scope or without scope, I mean, he
prefers without.
Yes, exactly. He can fish without it. So, I mean, that's why this year in the NPFL is like a true testament of everybody. Like everybody has an equal playing field. There's no live scope. It's going to be a grind all 3 days. Whoever has the most weight at the end of the 3 days will be holding that shield. So,
yeah. So we've talked, almost 40 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, 45 minutes, just on the NPFL, going down a few rabbit holes on that, and some rabbit holes of not even having to talk about the NPFL. But we cannot have you on and be a bruiser teammate and not talk about bruiser baits. And we saved the best for last. And but let's talk about some bruiser baits. And I mean, I been fortunate enough for the past 2.5 years or so to be able to fish with bruiser baits religiously. And this year I actually Bruiser's been affiliated with the podcast since day one. But and so this year I actually got part of the Bruiser team. And so but I'm excited about it. I love fishing the big stick and stuff like that, and the crawls. But the super swimmers, I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on the super swimmers this year. And speaking of that, so out of the plastics of bruiser baits and stuff, what would be your go-to and bait that you would be grabbing out of the box?
With forward facing sonar or with no forward facing sonar?
Well, let's say without, since you're going to be without this year.
So it depends on what lakes we have. I mean, like what we're going to be fishing and what kind of style I'm going to be doing. I know we just came out with the new Sidekick. Actually got it right here. It's our new chatterbait trailer. Before I used to use the Super Swimmer Junior, and it would be like my number one chatterbait trailer of all time. I mean, I've been using that thing for years. I've won a lot of money, with it and stuff. But our new Sidekick, and if you can see it right there, this thing swims awesome. I mean, through the water and everything. I've tested it. I've caught a lot of fish with it. Actually, I had this Super Swimmer at Saginaw Bay, and I was able to catch smallmouth and largemouth with it. It's arguably one of the best trailers to me out there. It swims It swims a lot different than the Super Swimmer Junior. But like going in this year, I'll probably have one of these tied on as a trailer, and then the Super Swimmer Junior. Just because I like to change things up, and sometimes fish might not be elusive to eat that. They might be attuned to eating the Super Swimmer Junior. And again, it's all a reaction in my opinion. So like, going this year, that's probably going to be like my number one combo is the jackhammer. I've always been a jackhammer chatterbait guy, even going back to the days of Okeechobee. So I'm really looking forward to just grinding that out. I just love throwing the jackhammer. It's just been one of my favorite tools that I've ever had to use, fishing. But with I know we just came out with the new Bait X. And I know you talking. You know what I'm talking about, Norman, right?
Yeah.
Our new Bait X, right here, as you can see, it's got a really big, thick tail. This thing is going to be a go-getter when we go to Sandy Cooper. Throwing this on top of the water, watching it wake up, and these fish follow it up and smash it. This is a great bait to use during pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn in Okeechobee. But in Sandy Cooper, this bait itself is going to produce some big bites. Even here in Tennessee, like when the grass gets up, in the early spring, the pre-spawn and stuff like that, these fish are going to explode this out of the water. This is going to be arguably one of the top baits, in my opinion, in 2025. Once we get the name out and everything, I don't know if I'm allowed to show this, but Steve says we can talk about it, stuff like that.
We can talk about it.
Yeah, so this bait is going to be. I've been using it for a couple years now, a bunch of prototypes, and it's been working. That bait I used primarily the whole time this year or last year in Saginaw. I caught 95% of my fish. I caught it on that bait, and I must have caught like 200 fish in those 3 days. It was so much fun, just horribly so much fun.
I was going to say, I've been throwing some of the prototypes around on that bait, man. And the water displacement that tail gives off and the vibration, the shake. And one of the things I like about that bait, and I've been throwing a little bit that way too, is working it as a topwater bait, almost like a slow rolling frog on the surface. And that tail almost gives it the effect of a buzz bait. It throws off so much water if you're able to keep it close to the surface and weight that bait, almost like a weight bait. But yeah, just a super. It has sort of the same look as like the Super Swimmer on steroids, basically.
Yeah.
But that tail versus a Super Swimmer, just because of the size of it and the way it has that ribbed halfway down the bait, where it almost gives that tail a free float, where it's ribbed, it just gives off so much more action on the back side of that bait.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry, Colin, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So like my number one bait for throwing for live scope is obviously the jig head minnow. I absolutely love that bait. Everybody loves it because you catch fish with it most of the time. If you know how to scope and you catch them. Listen, there's a little thing about scoping a lot of people don't understand. Just because you can see all the fish out there doesn't mean you can't catch them. and that's what frustrates me is about like, oh, it's a cheater box. Oh, it's your spotlighting. I'm like, listen, okay, you might be able to find them easier and locate them, but listen, half of the time you might not be able to catch them, and it's all about presentation to me. So it's one of my go-to baits this past year, and what actually got me in 12th place and won me $10,000 in Pickwick was my jig head minnow, the new minnow that we have, the 4.0. This is the olive oil color, and we also have this color as well, which is Rob Stash, which is my premier color. Steve was able to let me make my own name color and everything, so I was able to create a color that's kind of works really good for like herring lakes and stuff like that. So this bait, I throw it with like a quarter ounce jig head, 3/16, or maybe a 3/8 jig head. I know you guys probably familiar with Omega Custom Lures, but they just came out with the new jig head that has that little treble hook in the bottom. And I was able to use it at Lake Murray. And just recently I went to like Lake Blue Ridge over in Georgia. And what's so cool about Lake Blue Ridge in Georgia that a lot of people don't know about, and I can't believe I'm about to expose my secret. There's only a couple of lakes in Georgia that don't have junk fish, meaning when you're scoping either a bass, a walleye, or a crappie. And Blue Ridge lets you have that. Like, they don't have any stripers, so when you're scoping, most of the time it's going to be a bass. So
Yeah.
I was able to create and figure a color out, like a herring color over there, and it's called Rob's Stash. It works wonders in herring lakes, and it also works really, really good in Tennessee, in the Tennessee River. I mean, I was able to, secure a 12th place finish in the MPFL this past year in Pickwick, throwing the minnow. And it's everybody has their own different types of style minnows and stuff like that, but this bait obviously catches fish. It all depends on presentation and how you work it and everything. It's not like just because you can see the fish on scope doesn't mean you can't catch them.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people all the time, because they're like, well, you've got forward-facing sonar. I mean, and you're going to be catching all these fish. It's not fair for people who don't. And I'm like, the only thing that forward-facing sonar has done for me is let me know, like, what they're doing. I've learned so much of, like, the mindset of a bass, of how it will move around. I said, I may have caught maybe 2-3% more bass with having it on my boat than I have without it. But to be able to learn how the fish is moving and what, like, when they get here, this is when they're hitting. But if they're out here, they're not doing anything. They're just swimming around or whatever. I've been able to learn so much from it as a learning tool, not as a tool to be able to actually put more fish. I'm not putting maybe just a small percentage more in the boat with it than I am without it.
Best learning tool ever to be introduced in our industry. Best learning tool ever. There's so much we're learning about how fish act, react to baits that we never knew before. We would have never known, other than being able to see them in live time, how many times, Rob, you going pre-forward-facing sonar, going down a bank, throwing at what you could see, throwing at laydowns, throwing at reeds on the bank, back in the day, not realizing how many fish are off the shore in front of you or on the outside of you. And you're sitting there concentrating on everything you could see. Well, now we realize now that we're able to see what's going on down there in live time out front, out on the lake side of you, how many fish actually is out there. So now your whole world's opened up into being able to target all these other fish that we never knew existed. To be, and that's being right up close and personal with the bank. So the best learning tool they ever came up with, man, as far as that goes.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about how fish react and stuff like that. And it's also a great tool to like help you break down areas. For instance, like if you when you're running like especially herring lakes, and like when I was in Hartwell for the second term of the year, I ran like 80 spots during that event. And I was constantly moving. I'll drop my trolling motor. If they don't react right away, they're not going to react at that time. I pick up the trolling motor, move out to the next spot. And it kind of helps you set up like, okay, are the fish there or not there? It kind of teaches you like not to waste your time at a particular area. So you got higher percentage of trying to catch fish when you're running at different spots. That's kind of why I like about it is like I would run like 80, 70, whatever spots and stuff like that. But there'll only be like maybe 8 that would produce. But you imagine like if you are fishing an event and you just fish 4 or 5 areas and you don't catch anything, you can only imagine like, man, if I had that tool, I could probably figure out if those fish are even there or not, or I'm not wasting my time. And that's what's going to make this year going into the MPFL a little bit challenging, because you're not going to see like, it's going to be trial and error a lot of the times. And it's going to change a lot of things in how you fish and how you set up the fish and stuff like that going into this year.
Now, I wanted to say something while you had it. That's the sidekick. Do you think that sidekick would work all right on like an A rig and stuff? Do you think it's going to track well with having that on an A rig?
I'm not sure because I've never tried it with the A rig. Right now, I've been working on a side with Stealth Lures. Saxton Long owns that company. He's based out of here in Tennessee, in Knoxville area. And I was very fortunate, have a connection with him right away and to do some stuff with him. And so, yeah, his actually got the A rig right here. So, no, it's hooked on my shirt. I'm sorry. There you go. There's a little A rig right there. So I got a couple of little super swimmers and stuff like little super swimmer juniors right there. I have not used it with the Sidekick because I just started using the A rig, and unfortunate like this year in the MPFL it's banned, so we can't use it. But during like time when I go out there and just have fun and stuff, I'll throw it around and see. Like I said, I have not used it with the Sidekick, so I don't know how it would work. But that's a good question. I mean, maybe I'll go ahead and try it here soon. A rigs are really known for like the wintertime fishing and stuff like that. I know when
because it has started to turn on here.
Oh
which,
and
I'm just seeing it and seeing videos of how it moves. When I first saw it, I was like, golly, it just looks great, just swimming. And you're perfectly correct when you said best chatterbait trailer that you could put on there. Yeah. And so I've got some jackhammers. I don't use the jackhammers. I'll use just like the regular chatterbaits, or we've got local bait companies and stuff that make them. And I've noticed, and I told Norman this, because my thing is I'll throw a chatterbait where they're not supposed to be thrown. And I can't imagine spending $15 and chunking it where I chunk it and possibly losing it. But, I found this by accident. So you take a bobber stopper and then put it on the line, tie your chatterbait on, and then just run that bobber stopper down onto your knot. And that, I don't know if it's just that much, a little bit of the weight change in it, but it will increase how fast that blade will start chattering. It helps it get going a lot faster than if you was just to not tie, or just to not have one tie, that bobber stopper tied on or put on there.
That's pretty interesting. I'm gonna have to give that a try. So,
but I do want to talk about, because actually hearing about, I need to get some more, but hearing about maybe 2.5 months, I'm going to be throwing the Defender a lot, because that bite is going to be going crazy. You'll see it where you're at, but and so ain't nothing like throwing the little Defender and burning that sucker back, and then just having it just whoop. And but also the Bruiser Cruisers, that time is about right now too as well. And you can't beat, I tell people about Bruiser, because a lot of, like, I'd go and I'd change out hardwares. I'd go to whatever store, buy crankbait or jerkbait or whatever, and you got to change out the trebles. The hooks and stuff that come on the Bruiser hard baits and stuff are pretty phenomenal. I typically do not have to change them out unless I do something stupid.
Yeah.
So, but I do love throwing some cranking, and then I do know one thing though, that Dirty Dancer, Robert, the guy that's up underneath me on the screen right here, loves throwing that Dirty Dancer, and I've seen some fish being caught off of that thing that is phenomenal. Just not by Norman. He's horrible at it. I'm just joking, but Norman. I've never seen somebody have a dirty dancer or whatever on the boat all year round, 365 days. It don't matter. That dirty dancer is up on the boat somewhere.
I don't hit the lake unless I have the dirty dancer either in my rod locker or ready to grab at a minute's notice.
So what do you throw that that Banger 110?
Yeah, I throw. I have all the Banger 110s. I throw those a bunch. I like that little clown color that he has. It works really good. And try to change the subject really quick. So the beginning of this year, I got to fish. I fish Tellico a lot. I like fishing Tellico Lake. Because they have a lot of smallmouth there and stuff. And it was.
How close are you to? Not to interrupt, but how close are you to there?
20 minutes to the just under 30 minutes to Clear Creek ramp. That's the ramp I always go to. I got a couple of stretches over there, and so one day I went there and fished pretty much all day. I got there in the morning and just scoped all day with the minnow. Started, I had about 14 pounds worth of smallmouth and stuff, and I got out to an area. I'm like, I can only scope for so long because my knees and my head I'm tired of it. So I picked up the jig and I started flipping shallows, like fan casting and to a front of docks, and I had a thump, and I'm like, okay, cool. Set the hook, and I'm like, okay, it's a pretty big fish, and
let's go.
Me, I thought it was like a 5-6 pounder, and I'm fighting it, and sure enough, it was. I actually caught my PB. And it's crazy. I've lived in Florida my whole life, and I never caught a double digit until I moved to Tennessee. And I caught my first double digit that weighed exactly 10 pounds, 4 ounces at Lake Tellico at 50-degree water temperature, and this fish was like a foot of water. So, I mean, it was pretty cool to experience that. That 14-pound bag went up to like 25 pounds pretty quick. So, so that's a pretty good thing I can tell you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, and what's funny that you say that, because I had never caught a double digit until this past year, and 10.2 is my PB. And so, being buddies with Norman and going to ICAST and stuff like that. After we go to ICAST, Norman and I will always go to Lake Placid, and we'll spend 3 or 4 days in Lake Placid. But then we'll also go down to the Everglades to do some peacock fishing and stuff. And that first time, I'm like, yeah, we're going to go to Florida. I'm going to get a 10-pound. Norman's over here. I mean, stoking the fire with me, like I'm going to get a double digit, my first double digit. I don't care that it's in Florida, just get a double digit. We go down there. The biggest fish I caught down there was like 5.5, 6 pounds, which ain't nothing to cry home about. I mean, that's still a good fish. And I just look at him on the way back, and I said, Norman, I mean, if I wanted to catch a 5.5, 6 pound fish, I just stay at home. And he says, man, he said, the very first bite that I did have was a big fish. I will say.
You missed it on your very first cast you ever made down there.
Yeah, I mean, we were dragging, I was dragging a Carolina rig, and with the big nasty on it.
On a tree pile on Placid.
Huh?
On a tree pile on Placid.
Yeah, a tree pile on Placid. And I got it past it. I felt the tree. And then next thing I know, we get, I think maybe
he thought he was hung
3-4 feet from it.
He thought he was hung in the tree until the tree started moving.
And then it just started going, it just went, whoo. And I'm like, and he's like, that's a fish. And Hook said it, in which I I ended up. How I was fishing was I was hook setting on an awkward way, and so it was my fault. I should have turned to it and then hook set the right way. But I was doing one of these things kind of and hook setting like this. It didn't go. And Norman's like, "Hey, there was your double digit right there," and I was like, "Man," but I ended up catching the 10-2 on Chickamauga, actually using a big stick bait on a jig that we make, and I cut it down to where, I mean, it was probably about maybe 2.5 inches to not quite 3 inches, and just cut it and just throwing at the rock piles and just jigging the little micro jig, and next thing I know, and then it just starts running me out to the channel. And my dad was out there, and hey, I think he was more excited about the 10-pounder than what I was. I was like, "Let's go! They're down there. Let's go!" And so, but yeah.
What time of the year was that?
End of June, beginning of July.
Wow, you couldn't imagine if that fish was spawned out, how big it really was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was Norman and I. We talked about it, and Norman, I sent him the picture, and that was the first thing that Norman said. He says, "Could you imagine if you would have caught that?" Because spawn here happens. People say 60-degree water. I've seen them start when it's been like 56, 57 degrees, and I've seen it to where it hasn't started till 64 degrees. So it's all, I think it's more depending on our weather, what we're getting, and the cold fronts that's coming through. But he's like, "Could you imagine what that fish would have been?" I mean, because it wasn't fat, but it was not skinny, but it just had that beef to it. And he says, "Could you imagine if that sucker was spawned?"
When he caught it, it was eating well. But yeah, if he caught it about 2 months prior, like typically what, Colin? Middle of April to the 1st of May is usually what our spawn is up here, right in that.
We'll see. No, I fished chick when it started spawning end of March. Through April till middle of May. It's usually the time frame.
I feel like the first wave of spawners is usually the bigger fish.
Yes.
And then once they get that first, like you said, the 56, 58 degree temperature, they'll come in and get the heck out, and they're done.
Yeah. And I mean, but still, and you're right, I've noticed that too, is where that bigger fish is that first, and I think it's all just kind of dominance type deal. They just get in, do their job, and they're out, and they'll go sit off a ledge somewhere for the rest of summer.
Yeah.
So
I love fishing during the wintertime. I think wintertime, to me, when it's really, really cold, is like my favorite time of the year. It's just because you're able to pinpoint a lot of things. I think fish become really predictable during this time of the year on how they set up. And obviously with having forward facing sonar, it makes it a little bit easier. But during the wintertime, it's always been, just my favorite time of the year to catch a big bag or, a bigger fish. I mean, look, I caught my PB in 50-degree water temperature and less than a foot of water in the dead winter. So I don't know. It's just something about the wintertime. Just I end up catching a lot of big fish. I mean, I catch big fish all year long, but it's always been the wintertime. It's always been a big one. So
I had a buddy of mine, and he caught the third biggest fish on Chickamauga and the third biggest fish in the state of Tennessee. Here this past January at 14.9. Wow. And so, and he said, and he's a guide.
Yeah, Caleb was out on Nickajack today when I was out there. I actually seen him when he was coming in. And
Oh
he
yeah.
got it pretty good out there today too. The water temperature was like in the low 50s, or like
Oh, that was warmed up because when I was
it's
out,
probably,
Tick was 46 the other
well, it's
day.
probably in the 40s. And I actually looked at my units for some reason. I gotta find out why my water temperature was not working on my two big units at the console. So I got
Yeah,
to find out why that's not working. But yeah, it's probably like in the 40s then. But
yeah.
yeah, it was. But yeah, I seen him coming in. He said he done pretty well out there on catching some smallmouth.
Now
Well,
I got a tournament. I just signed up for the BFL at Chickamauga on February 8th. So looking forward to that one.
Oh man,
It's
that'd be
actually the
awesome.
day of my birthday, and I'm going to be turning 40 years old. So if I can host a win on my 40th birthday, it's going to
Oh,
be a
that'd be
treat.
cool.
Yeah.
When is that
well, the
event?
thing,
Say
When is
again,
that
Norman?
event? When is that event?
At Chickamauga, it's a BFL at Chickamauga on February 8th.
On February 8th. Okay.
so is there a bait or a product from a sponsor that here this next year, Robert, that you're looking forward to that you could talk about? Because I know, I mean, Bruiser's got some stuff coming out that we kind of got to stay hush hush on for the time being. And so, but is there something that you are going to that like the regular public could maybe be able to go out and get for this next year, that a product that you're looking forward to being able to utilize this year?
You know, this past year, the last couple of years, I mean, I've been primarily using like jig head minnows and stuff like that, and the chatterbait trailers like a Super Swimmer Junior. So I'm going into the year. I mean, I have to have a big arsenal of a lot of things because
Yeah,
you're really going to be like junk fishing this year with not using forward facing sonar. So I'm really looking forward to trying just a little bit of everything, just kind of getting back to my old style of like the grind. Um,
yeah,
I love throwing the intruders. Those craws have always been really, just good for me in the past and stuff like that. I love flipping jigs and stuff, and I just the whole, Steve's got a bunch of different types of crawdads and stuff like that I like to play with and stuff. I like to, on a lot of his crawdads, I like to bite them in half and just use them as chunks. And I've showed
yeah,
Steve, like I used to get like 3/4 ounce medlock jig. I used to throw a 3/4 ounce medlock jig, black and blue, and I used to get an intruder and just cut it in half and just use it as a chunk. And I showed Steve, I'm like, I catch 25-pound bags. He's like, I've never seen anybody do it. They usually like tie the whole thing together and stuff, up, the whole bait up to the thing. But I like to use little chunks, little chunk trailers and stuff. So I like to cut a lot of the baits out like that. So I'm looking forward to, getting back to that style. Like again, using the chatterbait,
Yeah.
the big nasty. I think that's going to play well in Santee Cooper because it's kind of like a wake bait, and
Yeah.
especially during pre-spawn, those fish are going to come out of the
yeah,
woodworks and smash that thing. I don't really get to use it down here because, like I said, it's like I've always been with the forward facing sonar and throwing, specific finesse baits and that kind of thing. So it's going to be interesting.
yeah,
Getting to use all the different plastics and his hard baits and stuff. I'm also sponsored by ARC as well, and I know we got a big arsenal of hard baits as well, and I like to use a couple of those things too. And I'm most likely going to, come up with a deal with Omega Custom Lures and try to see if they sell a bunch of jigs and spinner baits and stuff like that. And I'm really looking forward to just having different, like 15 different rods out there with 15 different baits instead of
yeah,
7 spinning rods and all tied up with a jig head minnow. So, so it's gonna be fun, man. I'm really looking
yeah,
forward to this year and stuff, and just getting to use a little bit of everything. Just try to
Right. Right.
figure out what the fish want at the time.
yeah. And that's the main thing is just once you figure it out and getting that pattern down, then just going out there and just having
Yeah.
fun. And so, but I tell you, I'm excited about this. I can't wait till end of March, and because I know I don't think it's going to happen before we get the classic, but right after we get back from the classic, that spawn should be starting to turn on, and need to get you down here, and the three of us will go out and do some spawn fishing, go checking some beds and ripping some lips and having some fun. But speaking of that, we need to, and speaking of bruiser baits, we need to figure out your schedule, because every year we do a bruiser challenge. And guys, and if you don't know what the bruiser challenge is, Steve Dial with Bruiser Baits will send us a pack, or not just a pack, but he'll send us a box that has different baits in it. And so Norman and I will get the baits, and we'll see them, and we'll pick what baits we want to use, and then we'll go out there and we'll compete. We can only use Bruiser Bait products, or actually the only baits that's been sent. And the past couple of years, we've done the Bruiser Challenge. It has been phenomenal. We do a live tracker on it, and so as you're watching, you're going to get to see the weights and how many fish and stuff that we've caught. Norman does a phenomenal job about editing that out, and but we need to get you, Robert, to come on and do that Bruiser Challenge with you. We'll tell old Steve that, hey, we're gonna need some more baits, and send them up here, and if he wants to mess with Norman, we'll let him mess with Norman. Throw him some baits that he can't catch any fish on. So
maybe we can get Steve to come up. I know a couple years ago he came up and visited me over in Georgia, and I was able to take him and Amber out. They came up and visit us, me and my wife, and they didn't come this past year, but I'm going to try to squeeze and see if I can get him to come up. I know he's just always busy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
that'd be cool if we could get Steve to come up and get to be a part of the Bruiser Challenge, and we could all fish the Bruiser Challenge. Yeah, that'd be cool if we get Steve to come up here and participate in that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be fun, and because we got all the cameras and stuff that we can, if we have, I mean, we can put cameras on all the boats and be able to take care of everything, and we'll put it together and get it put out there, and make sure that you get a copy of it, so any of your social medias and stuff that you can throw it on there as well. So, but we've almost been an hour and a half, brother, and this fat boy is hungry, and
you're hungry. I haven't ate. I actually didn't even get a chance to eat breakfast this morning.
Well, the only thing I had this morning today has been a Chick-fil-A burrito, and talking about, if you have not had one of their burritos, and if Chick-fil-A wants to sponsor us, I'm good to go with that. So I will eat them out of them burritos.
I was sitting down here at 10 o'clock this morning getting some work done. My wife was cooking me breakfast upstairs, cooking me some eggs, bacon. And I got that phone call at about 10 o'clock asking me if I could do a half-day trip. I didn't have nothing ready, no rods rigged. All my reels is actually ready to go to Florida. So in an hour and a half, I'm busting tail trying to get everything ready to hit the lake at noontime. My wife hollers down, your breakfast is ready. I said, baby, I can't eat. I have to hit the lake. So literally have not ate since dinner last night. So, because that unexpected trip I had. So I am, needless to say, this skinny boy is hungry too.
So, well, with that being said, Norman, why don't you ask our last question that we ask every guest that comes on, and we'll end it with that, brother.
That's right, man. Well, anyway, Robert, we appreciate it, man. We had a great conversation with you today, and it's always fun when we're able to get, and talk some fishing. But if you were to be able to have one person on your boat, and this person could be passed away or still with us, who would that person be that you would want to fish with for the day, and why would you want to fish with him or her?
Yeah, that's a good question. let me ponder this thing for a second. I know we're cutting time.
No, you're good.
You're good.
Man, if anybody, you said
Anybody, and could be passed
Anybody.
with us.
It don't have to be a pro angler or anything.
you know this is so random. I've never met my grandfather on my mom's side ever. He passed away a few months before I was born, so I never really got to meet him. But it would, knowing what I know and everything now, and if he was still alive, it would be a dream come true to take him fishing and just kind of show him, that would be like, that would be a dream come true to take my grandfather on my mom's side out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's got the same name as me, Roberto. I'm Cuban and Mexican. Even though I act like a white boy at heart, but I am actually, I am a Hispanic, but I am a true redneck in heart. But yeah, it would have been a dream come true to have him, get to know him, had a conversation with him, and get to fish with him. I mean, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And that you can't ever go wrong with however you answer that. I mean, because we've asked that, we've had over 100 episodes, and everybody, I mean, it's different because different people means different things to different people. And some people want to fish with the pro angler, and some people go the route that you do, and so, but yeah, to me, I think that I would want my grandparents or my grandfathers on both sides to fish with, and because they would be so amazed of the technology now that we have, and how we're catching fish now compared to how they were catching fish back when they were around and kicking, and it's way different. And so, but other than that, guys, we are going to get off here. We are looking forward to what's to come this year, and we're also got big things coming up for Deck Talk Podcast. So we want to say thank you for watching. Yeah. Robert, man, thank you for coming on and chit-chatting with us for an hour and a half. And it seemed like we really didn't get to talk too terribly much about really anything, but we talked for an hour and a half about a lot of things. So
we did. I really do appreciate you guys having me on. One quick thing before I leave. Yep. I just renewed my captain's license here in the state of Tennessee, so I should be having that here in the next couple months. So it should be prime time for getting ready for spawn. I will be fishing all the lakes here in Tennessee: Chickamauga, Watts Bar, it's really close to my house; Milton Hill, Tellico, Fort Loudon, Cherokee, Douglas. It's going to be big league charters. I'm going to carry that name that I had in Florida up here. Awesome. So I'm really looking forward to getting that going and starting my guiding career here in Tennessee. It's something that I left back in Florida that I never really accomplished here in Georgia when I moved up here. But I'm really ready to go ahead and get that going and start taking people out fishing.
And what is your social media platforms and stuff, and how can people reach out to you or at least follow you and stuff and keep track of what you're doing this year fishing?
Definitely. I'm on Facebook and Instagram quite a bit. I post a lot. I post a lot of controversial posts too on Facebook. I like to have like little debates and stuff. So you can catch me on Facebook on Robert Wroblewski on Facebook, and then on my Instagram at Rob Wroblewski Fishing. I'm going to start having a YouTube channel this year. I have it, but I'm actually going to be doing videos on every one of my events during practice and at the actual event and stuff like that. I'm going to do a lot of editing and stuff. I'm going to have a buddy of mine that's most likely going to travel with me going into this year, and he's going to do a lot of film for me. Just to try to get my YouTube channel up and to get a little bit more publicity and stuff. And and it's hopefully that will lead me to getting more sponsors in 2026 because the hard thing about moving up to a new different state is just getting new sponsorship and getting people to know who you are. And it's going to take a little time, but it's going to happen in 2026. I'm looking forward to that.
But guys, thanks again for watching, and we're going to get out of here. And hope you have a blessed day, and see you out on the water, guys.
Live the passion.